She raised her wine glass with that smile she always used before saying something cruel. The kind of smile that made you brace without knowing why. And then, without warning, she said it. I'm divorcing Martin. I've reconnected with my ex. He's better in every way. It landed like a plate smashing on marble. Silence crushed the room. Forks stopped midair. We were having halibut, ironically. Her favorite. She'd picked the restaurant too. Candlelight, linen napkins, some fancy place her book club liked. I didn't blink. I just reached for my water, took a sip, and nodded. I wish you both well, I said, like I was commenting on the weather. Our friends, if you could still call them that, looked at me like I'd just sprouted horns. Roger, been golfing with him 20 years, mouthed Jesus Christ, but stayed quiet. Joanne pretended to check her phone. Denise? She beamed. Actually beamed. Like she'd just won a game show. Her hand slid across the table and grabbed Alan's. Yes, that Alan. Her ex. He gave me a little wink. The kind of wink you give a man whose parking spot you just stole. I didn't flinch. I didn't stand. I didn't argue. I paid the bill. In full. Left a generous tip. Stood up, buttoned my blazer, and told them I'd see myself out. That dinner? That was the moment I buried the version of me she thought she knew. Because here's the truth. I'd already left her months ago. Just not physically. She thought that dinner was the grand reveal. That she was walking out on the dull, quiet man who always took out the trash and never forgot birthdays. But what she didn't know, what she never bothered to learn, was that I don't lose. I plan. The next morning, Denise came down to find the coffee already made, like always. Her favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle she wouldn't throw away, sat waiting. And beside it, a signed set of divorce papers. 2 copies. Neatly stacked. Paper clipped. Notarized. No note. No dramatics. Just paperwork. Clean and simple. Like everything else in my life. She laughed at first. Cute. He thinks this is how it works. She didn't realize it was how it worked. I'd consulted my estate attorney 9 months ago. Not when she started acting strange, but 2 years before that. You start noticing patterns when your job is analyzing risk for a living. The gym bag that never smelled like sweat. The sudden obsession with yoga retreats. The way she started locking her laptop, not just closing it. I knew. And I prepared. Later that night, I sat alone in my home office. Scotch in one hand, my old mechanical pencil in the other. I unlocked the bottom drawer of my cabinet. A drawer she always ignored because it looked like it was full of junk. Labeled it receipts and batteries. That was true, partly. But behind the false drawer wall, a red folder with one label. Contingency plan. I pulled it out slowly, like exhuming something sacred. Inside were 2 keys, a USB drive, and a notarized letter of authorization. Everything I needed to initiate what I'd spent years constructing. Not revenge. Let's be clear, I didn't care about revenge. This was an exit strategy. Because if you spend your life safeguarding other people's money, you eventually start asking, what if the person you trust most turns into your biggest liability? So I planned for it. Before I go on, if you've made it this far, I want to ask one small thing. Over 90% of the people who listen to stories like this don't subscribe, but it really helps the team if you do. It keeps us digging, creating, and telling stories most people would rather keep quiet. Thanks for being part of the few who actually notice. Now back to Denise. That night, she posted on Instagram. A glass of wine, a candle, her fingers laced in Alan's. Caption, here's to freedom, and finally living for me. The next morning, I triggered the first step. A 5-word message to my attorney. It's time. Trigger everything. And just like that, the life she thought she'd walked away with started slipping right through her perfectly manicured fingers. The movers came on a Wednesday. Quiet guys. Efficient. No logos on the truck. They carried out exactly 6 labeled boxes. Just what I needed. No framed photos. No starting fresh tears. No need. By Thursday morning, I was gone. Denise came home from brunch. French toast, 3 mimosas, and her friend Lacey's squealing approval of Alan's jawline. To find the bedroom drawers empty. Not ransacked. Just methodically clean. My side of the closet looked untouched, like I'd never existed. Only the empty hangers remained. Like ribs after the meat's been stripped. She called me once. I let it ring. I didn't go far. Just 12 blocks south, into a condo I'd quietly bought 3 years ago under a trust called St. Helena Preservation Initiative. Sounds like an environmental nonprofit, right? That was the point. It was fully furnished. Modern. Quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A place I visited a few weekends a year when she thought I was at client retreats. It even had a second set of clothes, toiletries, everything. I'd planned for comfort. Not because I knew she'd betray me, Because I knew people do. Even the ones who promise they won't. I didn't cry. Didn't even feel numb. I felt clean. After setting down the last box in the hallway closet, I plugged in the USB drive from the red folder. Booted up an encrypted app. No passwords, just biometric. Then I called Gregory, my estate attorney. 28 years of friendship. Never once asked me why I kept updating my trust documents every 6 months. He picked up on the second ring. It's time, I said. Trigger everything. He didn't ask a single follow-up. Instead, he replied, copy that. Effective date stay is filed. I'll notify the fiduciary custodian. Click. And just like that, the vaults began to shift. Denise, meanwhile, was busy painting a whole new narrative. She posted a photo of Alan hanging curtains, shirtless, of course. Caption, finally a man who builds with me. Alan wasn't building anything. He was squatting in a house that didn't belong to her, marveling at crown molding paid for with money she never understood. My name wasn't on the deed. Hadn't been in years. Hell, her name wasn't even on it. The house belonged to Lighthouse Integrity, LLC, Delaware-based, managed by a trust. That trust was layered under a holding company. That holding company had one member, a board consisting of Gregory's firm and a shell corporation in Ontario. I'd mapped this out so thoroughly, I could have taught a seminar. Back at the house, Alan found the espresso machine confusing and jammed the grinder. Denise laughed, then snapped a story video of him shirtless and struggling. The text overlay said, upgrade unlocked. Our mutual friends ate it up. Some commented hearts. Others sent DMs that probably included too many winks. And she loved it, being adored again. Being the heroine who left the boring guy for a man who grilled salmon shirtless on a Wednesday afternoon. They thought she'd won. But there was something she didn't know. Something no one had asked her that night at dinner. Did you actually read what you signed? Because it wasn't just a divorce agreement. It was a carefully constructed maze of waivers, disclaimers, and relinquishments, buried in legalese, surrounded by expected jargon. One clause, 14.3b, waived any future claim to entities, holdings, or accounts not explicitly disclosed as joint property. The language was clear, but the layout wasn't. That's where Gregory's brilliance came in. She signed, thinking she was just agreeing to keep the furniture and let me keep my boring stocks. The real irony? She actually giggled when she signed. Said, you're being so chill about this, it's weird. Chill. The word echoed as I poured myself a drink in the condo that no one knew about. The glass was crystal. The whiskey was 18 years old. And the silence, it was immaculate. Denise spent that week redecorating. She threw out my leather chair, replaced the antique rug with a faux vintage one Alan found on Instagram. The dog, my dog, wouldn't go near him. He kept growling. Eventually Alan snapped and said, either he goes or I do. The dog stayed. For now. Meanwhile, Lighthouse Integrity transferred one of its secondary properties, quietly, into rental staging. A third-party firm listed it. The proceeds were directed to a trust, one that Denise had waived claim to. On paper, I wasn't making moves. But behind the curtain, the stage was already being torn down and rebuilt. And the actress hadn't even realized the spotlight had moved. The photo went up Friday night. Denise in a linen blouse that probably cost more than our wedding caterer. Alan in a smug polo shirt holding 2 glasses of overpriced Cabernet, backlit by a sunset she didn't earn. The caption read, freedom feels better when you've earned it. With a winking emoji. It got 124 likes in the first hour. Heart emojis. Fire emojis. A couple of you glow, girl, comments from her yoga friends who always flirted with the idea of leaving their own husbands. She replied to one with, best decision I ever made, kiss mark dizzied. Denise wasn't just embracing a new life. She was doing it like a woman in a bad commercial for online banking. New throw pillows, new routines, new man. She even changed the home's Wi-Fi name to Casa Nueva and laughed about it like she'd just invented electricity. Alan played his part perfectly. He made smoothies in the mornings, talked about how stress is a choice, and bragged about some vague idea involving joint real estate ventures in Miami. Denise believed every word. The more vague he was, the more visionary she thought he sounded. We'll flip 4 condos a year, he said one night as he burned scallops and called it fusion. She clapped like a child. You're so driven. I was stuck for so long. I was across town at the time, on my second scotch, watching market reports, reviewing portfolio triggers. Alan wasn't driven. He was floating. He didn't have a real job. He had hashtags. And Denise, in her delusion, thought she'd traded up. She posted another story that week. Alan holding a notepad with floor plans, while she circled something with a glitter pen. Text overlay, hashtag next chapter, hashtag property power couple. And then came the moment that cracked her little fantasy bubble. They decided to sell the house. Cash out. Invest. Liquidate for leverage, Alan said, having just read one financial blog post. Denise called the agent who sold us the house 12 years ago, a woman named Carla who always brought little velvet folders to signings like she was hosting a spa treatment. Carla picked up on speakerphone. Denise smiled. Alan leaned back. We're thinking of selling, she said breezily. Should be simple. Great equity. My ex's name is off it. It's mine now. There was a pause. Carla didn't answer right away. Papers shuffled. Carla said, actually, I don't see you listed on the title. Denise frowned. Well, I signed, back then. We refinanced. I'm sure of it. More paper noises. Denise, this property is held under an entity called M. Cordell Holdings. That's not your name. Or Alan's. Denise laughed. Laughed like Carla had just told a dumb joke. M. Cordell, she repeated. Are you kidding me? Alan looked up from his phone, suddenly more interested. Yeah, Carla said, uneasy now. It's a corporation. Registered owner. I'm staring at the deed. You're not on it. Neither is Martin, technically. Just this company. There was a long pause. Alan leaned forward. So we can't sell it. Not unless the managing partner of M. Cordell Holdings authorizes it. And that would be me. Denise's voice got shrill. That's Martin. He's playing games. He hid the deed. No, Carla said softly. It's not hidden. It's just not yours. That night, Denise didn't post anything. Alan poured himself a neat bourbon and walked out back to smoke a cigar, something he did when he didn't want to argue but also didn't want to stay quiet. She followed him. I thought you said everything was clean. You said I signed the divorce. He took his boring little accounts. I kept the house. Alan raised an eyebrow. You didn't check? He said I'd keep it. He also said, I wish you well, Alan muttered. She threw the throw pillow at him. Missed. Meanwhile, I got an automated ping that the property had been flagged for potential listing. My firm had built in that alert years ago. I sipped my drink and clicked decline without even reading the full message. The house wasn't hers. Hadn't been in years. But the delusion? Oh, that still lived there. And cracks, real ones, had finally started to show in the perfect little freedom fairy tale. Denise's lawyer looked like the kind of guy who wore $4,000 suits, but still got them tailored to show off his calf tattoos. Named Jet, of course, spelled with 2 T's, because of course it was. She picked him because he had a podcast, a blue check, and a recent segment on a legal reality show where he interrupted a judge and somehow made it look cool. He had swagger, bravado, and exactly zero comprehension of what he was up against. But he sounded like a winner. Let's get your real estate portfolio assessed and rebalanced, he'd told her on day one. We'll claw back anything he tried to tuck under the table. Men like him always leave fingerprints. Oh, Jet. He made his first formal call to Gregory, my attorney, on a Wednesday afternoon. He didn't bother with pleasantries. This is Jet Lawson, representing Denise Halperin. I'm requesting a full disclosure of marital assets and current real estate holdings attributed to Mr. Martin Halperin as of the divorce filing date. Gregory, who doesn't even keep his bar certificates on the wall because he says the work should speak, waited 2 seconds, then replied evenly. Already disclosed in Exhibit C of the settlement. Your client reviewed and signed it. We will not be issuing duplicate inventories. Jet's tone shifted. Our understanding is that several properties, specifically the marital residence and at least 2 vacation assets, were concealed through corporate structuring. Incorrect, Gregory replied, as if he were talking about the weather. They were declared as part of M. Cordell Holdings. That entity is a legally separate corporation established prior to the marriage and updated per Schedule 4A. Your client waived any claim to corporate titled properties and trust-controlled financial instruments. Jet paused. I'm sorry, what? She reviewed and signed Clause 14.3b, Gregory said. I have the signed original here. She initialed every page. Jet went silent. Then, a soft exhale. Clause 14.3. Gregory let the silence stretch. B. Yes, Gregory said. The clause that explicitly states any and all assets held by third-party fiduciaries, corporate holdings, or inter vivos trusts are beyond contestation, provided proper disclosure. But she thought those were joint. They never were. She was briefed. We have the recorded meeting. The line disconnected. Gregory set the phone down like it was nothing. Meanwhile, Jet was already dialing Denise. She picked up after 2 rings, giddy and breathless. Did you crush it? Tell me we're going to nail him on hiding assets. There was a pause. Jet didn't even clear his throat. Just let the moment hang like the beginning of a panic attack. Denise, he said carefully. Do you understand what you just let him take? Her laugh faltered. What are you talking about? He can't take the house. Or the cabin. Or the Florida. You didn't own the house. Jet cut in. You never did. It was under a holding company. One that predates your marriage. Okay, but you waived it, he snapped. You signed clause 14.3b. It's ironclad. No, she whispered. No, no, no. You said we could claw back. I said we could if it wasn't protected. It is. Layered. Structurally opaque. There's a trust, Denise. And he's not even the executor of that trust. Her breathing got shallow. I thought you said he was just boring, she managed. I thought he was too. Jet muttered. She hung up on him. I was at the range when it happened. My phone buzzed once. Gregory's short message. He called. All good. Clause 14.3, B held. I lined up my next shot. 5-iron. Smooth swing. Ball landed 3 feet from the pin. That was the moment the power dynamic shifted entirely. She didn't know it yet, not fully, but her lawyer did. And panic, once it finds a crack, doesn't politely wait its turn. It rushes in. It claws through walls. And Denise? She just realized the walls weren't hers. They never were. Denise stormed into the bank like she was kicking down the gates of a castle that still belonged to her. Strappy heels, oversized sunglasses, and the thin kind of scarf people only wear when they want to look more important than they are. Alan followed behind, checking his reflection in every pane of glass, still pretending to be unfazed. But the smile he wore was thinner than usual. He hadn't posted anything all week. At the teller's desk, Denise pulled out her ID and slapped it down like a royal decree. Hi. I need to transfer funds from my joint account into a liquid asset portfolio, preferably something high yield. The teller, a young guy with a nervous smile and unfortunate haircut, typed for a bit. His brow furrowed. I'm sorry, ma'am. There are no joint accounts listed under your name. Denise narrowed her eyes. Yes, there are. We've had one for 15 years. I just used it a few months ago. He double-checked, called over a manager. They stepped away, whispered. Alan leaned over and muttered. Do you want me to call my guy? She waved him off. The manager returned, hands clasped like a funeral director. Ma'am, the joint account you're referring to was formally closed 4 months ago. The remaining funds were transferred to a corporate trust. To what? She snapped. The manager stayed calm. To MCH Asset Management. Per the closing authorization signed by Mr. Halperin. You are not a beneficiary of that trust. Denise's face paled. Alan blinked. Wait, I thought you said you had. Like, what? 7 figures tied up in stocks. I did, she hissed. The manager cleared his throat. The brokerage accounts in question were held under an individual investment license. They were never joint accounts. I believe your attorney would have the documentation. Alan took a long breath, reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. He tapped a message, glanced sideways at Denise, then tapped again. She noticed. Who are you texting? No one, he said flatly. Just handling a few things. The manager excused himself with a polite nod and the kind of expression bank managers reserve for watching someone lose a game they didn't know they were playing. Alan didn't wait for her. I'm heading out, he said, eyes still on his phone. I'll see you back at the house. Denise didn't respond. She stared at the empty screen in front of her, then at the little digital ticker above the teller window, showing the next available customer. Back home, the silence greeted her like a stranger. The dog didn't come to the door anymore. He'd started sleeping in the guest room ever since Alan moved in. Probably smarter than both of them. She walked into the kitchen. There, in the middle of the counter, was a single envelope. Her name, neatly printed. No return address, but she knew the handwriting. That quiet, perfect printing Martin used on every holiday card and sticky note for 20 years. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single white card. One line, written in black ink. You traded a future for a fantasy. No signature. None needed. She stood there, the silence pressing against her chest. Alan hadn't come home. He hadn't even texted. Her phone, so often lit with affirmation and likes, now sat dark and stupid on the counter. And it was only then, only in that moment, that she realized what real fear felt like. Not the fear of being alone. The fear of realizing that someone you dismissed, someone you underestimated, someone you publicly mocked, had been playing a game far more complex than you ever bothered to see. Martin hadn't gotten even. He'd simply stepped out of the ring and taken the entire arena with him. Denise spent the next day on the phone like a politician mid-scandal. calling anyone who might still pretend to care. She started with the safe ones first. Lacey, of course, who used to hang on her every complaint about Martin's beige energy. Lacey didn't answer. Texted back 2 hours later with, "Swamped at work. Hope you're doing okay, 2 hearts." The kind of response that says, "I'm distancing myself in case this gets messy, eh?" Then came Joanne, the brunch friend who always said she admired Denise for being brave enough to chase her happiness. Joanne picked up, but it was all clipped small talk and fake apologies. "I just feel blindsided," Denise said, pacing the kitchen. "He planned this. Years. Like a freaking Bond villain." Joanne paused. "I mean, you did announce your divorce in front of 10 people like it was a toast." "It was a toast." "Yeah, that's kind of the problem." Silence. Joanne added, "I don't know what to tell you. Maybe next time don't humiliate someone who handles asset strategies for a living." Click. Denise stood in the middle of her silent, echoing kitchen, staring at the tile Martin had personally selected and now technically owned. She called one more person. Melissa. Sweet Melissa, the one who always offered to mediate when things got tense in the past. If anyone was still in her corner, it was her. Melissa answered after 2 rings. "Thank God," Denise exhaled. "Everyone's acting like I murdered someone." "It's Martin, for God's sake. The man used to organize our spice rack alphabetically. Now he's some kind of what? Financial ninja." There was a pause on the other end. Then Melissa said, quietly, "Denise, he called me. Months ago." "What?" "He just said to keep an eye on my assets. That if anything ever shifted with you too, I should make sure everything in my name stayed in my name." Denise went silent. Melissa added, "He didn't tell me what was going on. But the way he said it, I don't know. He sounded like a man who was quietly closing doors." Another silence. "He wasn't angry," Melissa added. "He sounded done." Denise hung up before she could respond. Her next stop was her old financial advisor, Walt Corman, the man who'd managed her side of things during their marriage. She hadn't called him in a while. Back then, she didn't need to. Martin took care of all that. Walt was always courteous, always deferential. A boring man, Denise thought, perfect for handling boring accounts. She walked into his office, now decorated in trendy minimalist tones. There was a new receptionist, younger, prettier. Denise helped her in to see Mr. Corman. The girl checked the screen, hesitated. Then, "He'll be right with you." Walt came out wearing a tight smile. "Nervous." "Denise, good to see you. I need to get clarity on my accounts," she said, cutting to the point. "I'm being stonewalled. I think Martin moved things. Or worse." Walt motioned to a seat, sat across from her, then opened a small folder. He looked over a sheet. "Denise, I don't manage any accounts in your name anymore." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the last remaining account under your individual profile was closed 11 months ago. You authorized the consolidation yourself. I have the email." No, I didn't." Walt turned the screen toward her. There it was. Her own signature. A timestamp. A digital confirmation. She remembered now. Martin had sent her a simple email saying, "We're simplifying our holdings. Can you click and approve?" She hadn't even read it. Walt continued gently. "Everything else was in joint instruments. But as I'm sure you now know, those were all managed under trusts or holding groups. You didn't have controlling interest." She leaned back. "And the new accounts?" she asked, voice breaking slightly. "The recent ones?" Walt exhaled. "Those aren't in your name. Martin restructured everything through fiduciary pathways I no longer have access to. And frankly, I wouldn't even know where to begin. He brought in a much more advanced firm years ago. I was only kept on out of courtesy." She stood abruptly, knocking the chair back. Walt didn't flinch. He simply said, "Denise, you were never really part of that world." Driving home, she passed the country club she once joked was Martin's Temple of Boredom. The parking lot looked the same, but everything else had shifted. Inside her home, the dog wouldn't come near her. Her phone buzzed once. A notification. Alan had changed his Instagram bio. "Dream bigger." And underneath it, a tagged photo. Not of Denise. Someone younger. On a boat. In Naples. Denise didn't cry. Not yet. But something inside her cracked in a way that tears wouldn't fix. She was no longer in denial. She was drowning in it. Alan started coming home later and later. At first, it was little things. Missing dinner, claiming client meetings that always ended with him smelling like high-end tequila and someone else's perfume. Denise made excuses for him and for herself. "He's networking," she told Lacey, who never replied. "He's building something." That's how real entrepreneurs operate. But the silence grew. Thicker. The kind that doesn't scream, it smirks. By week 3, He'd stopped showing up at all. No warning. No fight. Just absence. His gym bag disappeared from the hallway. His laptop charger no longer draped over the kitchen island. Even the electric toothbrush he insisted was life-changing was gone from the master bath. Denise opened the closet and stood frozen. His half. Empty. No note. No text. Not even a performative goodbye. At first, she told herself it was temporary. He was probably taking space. Maybe planning something dramatic. He was always the type to stage grand returns. But something about the way the closet was so perfectly emptied, no mess, no rush, told her this wasn't a break. It was an exit. She called his number. "We're sorry. The number you've dialed is no longer in service." She tried again. Same message. Robotic. Cold. Final. Denise sank onto the edge of the bed. Hers now, if only in theory, and stared at the blank screen of her phone like it had betrayed her too. Then, like someone peeling off a Band-Aid too slow, she opened Instagram. Alan's account was still public. His last story, a slow pan across a gleaming yacht in the Florida Keys. Champagne. Open water. A woman's laugh in the background, higher pitched than hers. Younger. Confident. Then a flash of him, sunglasses on, kissing the top of a head that wasn't hers. Tagged at Sierra Marin. The caption? "Real freedom is knowing what to leave behind." Denise didn't scream. That required strength. She just sat there, fingers trembling, scrolling through Sierra's feed like it was a crime scene. Yoga influencer. Crypto advisor. 19,000 followers. Sun-kissed in every photo. And Alan, already appearing in 3 of them like he'd always belonged. That was the final punch. Not just that he left, but how easily he replaced her. She wandered the house that was no longer hers. She opened drawers, looked for anything of his, and found nothing. He'd planned it, just like Martin had. Everyone was planning while she was performing. That night, after 2 glasses of wine and an hour spent staring at the empty passenger seat of her car, Denise drove to Martin's condo. She didn't even know if he still lived there, but something in her gut said he did. It was late. Streetlights flickered as if unsure if she deserved illumination. She parked and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, before stepping out. She buzzed the door once. No answer. Buzzed again. A longer press. Nothing. She stood in the lobby for 5 full minutes, watching the elevator numbers rise and fall for other people, other lives. Then she stepped back outside and looked up. A light was on in one unit. She thought it might be his. Or maybe she just hoped. No curtains moved. No shadow appeared. She waited by the door another 10 minutes. Then 15. The night pressed colder than it should have. Eventually, she sat down on the front step, arms wrapped around her knees like a teenager caught outside after curfew. She didn't buzz again. She knew. He wasn't going to come down. Not for her. And somehow, that silence hurt more than Alan's betrayal. More than the disappearing money. More than the frozen accounts or hollow friendships. Because Martin's silence wasn't cruel, it was calculated. She had screamed at him once. In front of friends. Called him mediocre wallpaper. Said she wanted a man who mattered. Now here she was. Alone. Forgotten. Staring up at a window that wouldn't open. Not because he was angry. Because she was irrelevant. And she finally, fully, felt it. By the time Denise walked into Jet's office, the spark was gone from her eyes. Her makeup was still flawless. She'd always maintained appearances. But her voice? Paper thin. Like someone trying to negotiate with gravity. "I need to undo it," she said, gripping the arms of the leather chair like it might launch her backward in time. The filing. The agreement. All of it. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Jet looked up from his tablet. Slowly removed his designer glasses. "Denise, do you think we're in a fairy tale?" She blinked. "You think you can wave a wand, scream do-over, and the court forgets you cheer-toasted your divorce in a restaurant with your affair partner?" Her jaw tightened. It wasn't a toast. It was a broadcast. And Martin didn't improvise this. This wasn't a bruised ego. It was an exit protocol. Precise. Tactical. "I didn't know what I was signing," she muttered. He sighed. "Then you shouldn't have fired the financial advisor before asking questions. You waived rights to the entire corporate layer. Trusts. Entities. Financial instruments. I told you, Clause 14.3b isn't a suggestion. It's a trapdoor. And you pulled the lever yourself." She sank deeper into the chair, eyes flicking to the wall where Jet's diploma sat next to a framed photo of him with some celebrity she couldn't name. They both smiled like everything was permanent. She whispered, "There's got to be something. He can't just walk away with everything. I gave him years. My best years." Jet stared at her. Not coldly. Not cruelly. Just tired. "Denise." You didn't give him years. You spent them, and he invested them. Then, after a pause, and he's been collecting dividends for a long time. That silence, the kind that follows realization, hung thick in the air. 10 minutes later, Denise was in her car, gripping the steering wheel with fingers so tense they turned pale. She wasn't sure what she'd hoped for. Mercy? A loophole? One more trick? She drove across town to Martin's firm. The receptionist looked up, smiled politely. Ms. Halperin? Denise nodded, surprised they still knew her name. He's not in, but he left something for you. The receptionist handed her a flat envelope. No logo, no stamps, just her name, written in the unmistakably neat handwriting she used to tease him about. Denise took it slowly. Her fingers shook as she opened the seal right there, beside the glass wall looking into the empty boardroom. Inside was a single letter. No formal header. No legal terms. Just a simple note on cream paper. Denise, you made your choice. You said I was dull. Turns out, dull men plan. No sign-off. No threats. No requests. Just that. And somehow, it hit harder than any legal document. She stood there for a long time, holding that paper like it might start burning in her hands. People passed behind her in suits and heels, living lives she'd been adjacent to for years, but never really part of. She remembered laughing with Alan about Martin's little firm, mocking how he always triple-checked contracts and indexed his files like a librarian. She'd once joked that he probably labeled his socks by color and texture. Now she realized, of course he did, because some men waste their time, and some men prepare for the moment you show them exactly who you are. Outside, she sat in her car and stared at the building. She wasn't sure whether to cry or scream, so she did neither. She just read the letter again, then folded it, then whispered, to no one. I didn't know who I was married to. And this time, she meant it. The envelope came by courier. No warning, no return address, just a knock on the door and a suited man holding a clipboard. Denise opened it, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Her hair was tied up with the same scrunchie she used to mock Martin for owning. Funny how the things you ridicule eventually outlast you. The man nodded once. Please confirm receipt. She signed with a hand that trembled enough to turn her name into something barely legible. He left without a word. Inside the envelope was a thick, stapled document. Official letterhead, dense paragraphs, legal precision. But the only part that mattered was right at the top. Notification of termination of residential occupancy. Effective date, immediate. It wasn't her condo. That's what it said. In cooler, more heartless language, of course, but the message rang loud and final. The condo she believed was hers to keep as part of the divorce. The safety net, the clean slate, the fresh start, wasn't hers at all. It was never gifted, never transferred. Held in trust. Leased to her under conditional terms, reviewed annually. Terms she'd unknowingly violated the second she let Alan move in. And now? Now the trust had exercised its right to revoke the tenancy. In layman's terms, she had 3 days to vacate or face legal action. She sat down on the couch, the one Alan insisted they reupholster in faux leather, and stared at the walls like they might offer a better version of reality. Then she picked up her phone. She dialed Martin. He answered. Not voicemail. Not an assistant. Martin. His voice was exactly the same. Level, controlled. Like they were discussing quarterly taxes. She didn't scream. Didn't beg. Her voice cracked, but she asked calmly. Why are you doing this? A pause. Then he spoke. You wanted better, he said. I let you go find it. Click. She stared at the screen as the call ended. The silence on the other end felt heavier than any screaming match they'd ever had. Because this wasn't rage. This was finality. Denise set the phone down slowly. She tried to stand but sat again almost immediately, like her knees forgot how. She looked around the condo, the one she'd posted so many filtered pictures from. The one she called her New Kingdom. The artwork Alan picked out. The mirror she insisted gave her Miami energy. The bar cart that hadn't been touched since the night he walked out. It all looked like props on a stage that had closed weeks ago. She wandered into the bedroom. The closet still held some of her clothes, but she already knew. None of them mattered. Not to the trust. Not to the law. Not to the world that had moved on without her. She pulled open the nightstand drawer and found the old card Martin had once left for their anniversary. Year 7. The year she said he was too predictable. It was still there. Untouched. Inside, his neat handwriting, sharp and methodical, had once written, My plans always include you. Not anymore. Now she was outside the perimeter. The lease was up, not just on the condo, but on the illusion she'd built. The image of control, of starting over, of being the one who left on her terms. Martin had let her go, but what she finally understood, what twisted the knife even deeper, was that he had never chased after her. Not once. Because you don't chase something you were already prepared to lose. You let it walk into its own undoing, and then you lock the door behind it. The air was still the way only coastal nights can be. Cool, unmoving, as if even the breeze was too polite to interrupt. Denise walked the waterfront path slowly, unsure why her feet had brought her there. She hadn't meant to end up near Martin's new building. She told herself she was just getting fresh air, told herself the way people tell themselves all sorts of things that stopped being true long ago. In her purse was a letter, folded once, written late at night under a single lamp, her pen shaking more from pride than fear. It wasn't an apology, not fully. That would have cost her more than she was willing to spend. It was the gesture, one last chance to say something. She'd spent days rewriting it, crossing out lines, adding fake strength, deleting it all, starting again. Now it just sat there, useless, heavy. She saw them before they saw her, or maybe they never saw her. Martin sat on a bench near the railing, right where the boardwalk curved by the stone fountain. He was facing the water, posture relaxed, suit jacket folded neatly beside him. Next to him sat a woman. Not glamorous, not flashy, but there was something about her, something grounded. She laughed at something Martin said. Not the fake kind Denise used to force when she was half listening. A real laugh. It sounded easy. Martin smiled. Not smug, not cold, just content. Denise froze behind a hedge. Her heart thudded in her ears, but her body didn't move. She couldn't make herself step forward. Couldn't even bring herself to blink too fast in case it broke the illusion. They looked good together. Natural. Like they'd known each other a while. Like there were stories between them she hadn't earned the right to know. After a few moments, Martin stood. He reached down, offered his hand. Not out of obligation, but quietly, almost without thinking. The woman took it. No fanfare. No posing. They walked toward the building side by side. Her hand nestled lightly in the crook of his arm. He never looked back. Denise didn't call out. Didn't try to intercept. She just stood there, clutching the letter she had spent hours crafting. The final plea. The maybe he'll read this and understand page. But now, she knew he wouldn't read it. Because Martin didn't need closure. He'd closed. Without drama. Without spectacle. Without her. She slid the letter back into her purse. Took one last look at the bench. Empty now, but still carrying the ghost of a man who once sat across from her at 1,000 dinners. Quiet, unnoticed, dependable. The same man she'd underestimated until the very end. Her lips moved before she could stop them. A whisper, barely audible. I had no idea who I was married to. No answer came. Just the sound of the tide lapping gently at the shore. She stood there a little longer, then turned, and walked away alone.